working with the timer, the first thing I'm going to want to do is to have somewhere for my timer text to display on screen. I could send it to the output window, so I could send it as a trace statement, but that doesn't really work well in a game. If you have a timer going and you're telling the player that you have 10 seconds to do something, then it counts down 9, 8, 7, 6. So if we want to do something like that, what I recommend is creating that text field that we're going to use. Choose a nice pleasing blue. I hate times, so I'm not going to choose times as my font. So we'll go find something a little bit better. So I'm going to choose Myriad Pro. Now I can click there and put time, colon, and then put in some time, make it a little bit bigger. So we can see it. So now I have my dynamic text field. It needs to have an instance name because if I'm going to be using it on stage, it needs to exist. So for that to occur, I need to give it an instance name. So at that point, I can call it something. And I often name my text fields message because I'm going to be sending a message to them. So that's a common name that I like to use as part of that. I will get scolded by Flash and it won't display things correctly because currently the only characters it's going to embed for me to display are TIME colon space and 000. So if I want to display a time of 10, I'd get the 0, but I wouldn't get the 1. And I would get no other number. So I have to tell it, yeah, I want to embed those. So if I click under embed, I can then embed a whole bunch of stuff, or just to give myself flexibility, I'll do uppercase, lowercase numbers, and punctuation. That embeds the text so I have access for it later. So if I look in my library, I can see that that text is there. With my dynamic text field, my font's in my library, and I could have named it, so if I have more than one font in my project, I can name it. Under properties, it's dynamic text, has an instance name of message, and now, so that I have more control over it, I like to wrap it in a movie clip shell. It's possible to dynamically create text fields and put them on screen purely through code, and we may get to that at some point, but I think it's often easier, especially in something like this. You can control your formatting and everything else much easier using the visual palette than you can by typing a whole bunch of text formatting code, which in Flash, the code to do your text formatting is not terribly user-friendly. So I'm going to call this symbol time display. So that movie clip that contains my text, I will then call that time display. I have my instance name, my movie clip. Well, somehow I just made... Okay, that was really weird that it popped up an extra display. So I have my dynamic text field message inside my time display movie clip. So now I want to work on building the code to run my timer. To do the timer, I can create a timer object. And the word timer with a lowercase t is not reserved, so I can make that the instance name of my timer object, which I kind of like to do then. And then I will tell Flash it is a timer. It now gives me my import statement. We'll finish instantiating that in a setup function to follow a good practice here. Now, it's also common to use counter with this when we're trying to do a reverse countdown as part of our display, because then we can take away from what's happening here. We can also use, if we don't want to use that extra variable, then we can access a property called the current count, which is how many iterations the counter is going to go through. And because Flash will tell us, well, the counter is counting, every cycle it spits out a message and says, hey, I counted once, I counted again, I counted again. That's what timer objects do. But it can also then tell us when the timer is done. It will say, oh, I'm all done. And then it will spill out a message and say, I'm done. So it gives you these two things, and you can listen for them separately. Because with the timer, I could just say, hey, tell me when you're done. But if I'm doing a countdown where I want to tell the user you have 10 seconds to do something, then at that point I need to build that in appropriately. So now as I'm going to put in my setup function, at this point I can say timer equals new timer. And then when I put in my parenthesis, apparently, and thanks to the help of the class, rename that function, and now at this point that should eliminate the problem. So now when I do timer, my code hinting tells me the first number I'm going to list is the delay, how frequently I want my timer to go off. And the repeat count is how many times I want the timer to go off. The delay is measured in milliseconds, so if I want the timer to spit out a message every second, I would enter in a number of 1,000. If I want the timer to repeat forever until I tell the timer to be done, I put in a repeat count of 0. Otherwise, I specify how many iterations I want it to take. I'm going to just go with 5 right now, so that means this timer is going to go for 5 seconds. That's what it will do. So now I have a timer. It's not doing anything yet. If I want the timer to start, I actually have to tell it to start. So if I wanted to start right away, I could do that. I suppose in setup I also should have my stage add event listener, and then it'd be event and my loop. Now one thing, if you find when you're doing your event listeners, if you want more code hinting, it helps to actually start your instantiate your functions first, then go back and do your event listeners, then you get better code hinting. So if and just to show you how that process works, if I know I'm going to call it loop, if I say function loop, and then loop is going to be tied to my enter frame listener, and then I type event here, it put in my import statement, which at that point, now when I have my event listener, let's try again. Add event listener. All right. But now when I hit event, it actually gives me the rest of it, of which enter frame is on this list. Enter frame. So stage is listening for my enter frame loop, so it gets that process started. What I can also do is say timer dot add event listener, and now the timer is going to add a. Now I can get my code hinting to show up by holding down Control and hitting the space bar, and then Flash does its best guess about what code hinting to show me. So if you're not used to that shortcut, Control space gets your code hinting to come up with its best guess. Now at this point, because it's a timer, we can see we have certain events we can listen for. One is the timer event, and one is the timer complete event. And we'll listen for both of those and track out the data of those so then we can start to understand how they work as part of the timer object. So I'll have my timer event, and we'll call this one timer loop. So we add our timer event, and then we'll have our timer complete. And of course, you can always name your functions as you see fit. Some programmers like to name their functions after the particular event that they're listening for. So the enter frame function would be called enter frame. My timer function would just be called timer. But I'd have to modify that a little bit because my instance is called timer. Timer complete would be the name of that function. So I mean, you can do that. I'm just not a big fan of that style of coding. So now we have a basic shell going on here, and it's all ready to start doing things with. The one thing we haven't done is we never told the timer to start. We'll get to that in a moment. But the timer will sit there and just do nothing happily until we tell it otherwise. So while the timer is looping, what I could say is timer display dot message dot text equals time plus. Now at this point, we have to figure out what number we want to have show. And this is where we can explore a couple of different strategies on this. So the timer object does have a current count property, so we can access that property. So we could calculate what our total time is minus the current count. So if I take my counter object, and I could modify up here, counter equals 5. I can say I want my timer to run for counter loops. So I'm actually creating, if I change my counter, it changes how long the timer runs. So it's kind of, whenever you're going to be using a number in multiple places, it makes sense to then display it that way. I'm not sure if Flash is going to allow me to do the mathematical calculation as part of showing the text, or if I'll have to have an intermediate value of showing what my current thing is. Because it's effectively what we want to see is counter minus timer dot. And as soon as I hit dot, it shows me now the properties of the timer object. Keeping in mind that I declared timer as a variable. I've given it properties. So it knows it's a timer object. It has the import statement so it can complete the code hinting. And at that point, it shows me, oh, current count. What is the timer on right now? So I'll just double click on that. So I want to perform this math. What I don't know is it going to freak out while I try to have it perform that math and then display it in the same line? If I'm lucky, this will work. If not, there's some things I can do to do that calculation. So I'm going to save this. And at this point, if I were to run it, it is unhappy at line 20. Oh, did I call this time? I call this time display, not timer display. Let me just add an R to it so it matches my code. And now we have nothing happening yet. Back to here, pull up my code. I'll pin my code so it always stays up no matter where I go. I have never called setup, and I never started my timer. So if I call setup, nothing. No error messages. Sometimes if nothing happens, but there's no error messages, you feel a little small victory at that point. Because when you get lots of error messages and nothing happens, that's when you feel that, you know, the world's going to end and you're a failure and it's just sad and rough. So I'm going to add in my timer start. As soon as I hit the ST, it's giving me the code hinting for it. I can hit return, close it out, save it, run it. 4, 3, 2, 1. Look at that. It worked, sort of. Okay. Cool. To get rid of the problem, now that we've given the peanut gallery enough time to hem and haw over it and stress and also to debug some of the code, we've tried things like changing counter to a 6 and then putting in counter -1. So that means it starts out, but the problem is it still starts out and says 0, 0, 0. I don't like that. I don't want it to start out and say 0, 0, 0. So what I can do is I can now take my line 22, copy that. I can put that here, and at this point I can say it just needs to be counter. So it starts out with, what is the value of counter? Counter starts out at 5. Get rid of this -1 crap. There. So we start out and we initialize the value of that text field. So the first time we get to see it on screen, setup runs and it says, whoa, we'll make it time plus counter. Subsequently, it's counter minus the timer's current count. So if I run this, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And now I'm done.
That's the 0 I thought you didn't want to see.
No, it's the 000 at the beginning, because why would I want to see 000 at the beginning? I want to know that I start at 5 and then I count down and then I hit 0 and time's up. Now when time's up, at that point we could make anything we want happen. That's under timer done. So at this point I could say timer display text. I could say you lost. Now I'll be positive. You are a special person. No, I'm trying to be positive and happy here. You are a special person. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You are a. And now I ran into a little problem that the text field that I'm trying to put the text into doesn't auto-expand for new content. So if I wanted to be able to show more text, I do need to make that message field bigger. And then it will fit. So I can double click on it and just stretch this out, move this over, and that will probably, I can test the fitting here. So I could say you are a special person. Emoticon. Why not? Time. 2, 1. So now I have a timer object. I can control the timer. I can control the countdown of it, the display of it. I have the timer's timer function, which fires off every loop or iteration of the timer. And then I have the timer complete function called timer done, which fires off when the timer is all done. So I have those two things at work. This gives me now a flexible timer that I can use elsewhere in my projects. It's a nice, clean, tidy approach.